أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتهدون الذي بعد فلا يرى وقرب فشهد النجوى تبارك وتعالى والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء وخاتم المرسلين والشفيع المذنبين سيدنا ونبينا بالقاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا واللعنة الدائمة الباقية على أعدائهم ومنكر فضائلهم وغاصب حقوقهم من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه الكريم: إن الله اصطفى آدم ونوحا وآل إبراهيم وآل عمران على العالمين. صلوات عليكم. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala once again for this opportunity of Azaf Sayyid al-Shuhada, which is actually the lifeline for the Shia community, where we are able to get in touch with our religion and our madhab and our values and teachings. And as I've been trying every night, at least to emphasize this point, let me share with you a story of your own land, United States of America. After the first Gulf War, when the Americans went in order to push Saddam out of Kuwait, and then there was a uprising of the Shias in the southern part of Iraq. Initially, Americans encouraged that, but then they realized they are getting into something they don't like. They let them down. And Saddam was basically allowed to do whatever he wanted to do in the southern part of Iraq. And that actually brought about a situation where Shias from Iraq in thousands had to leave their land, their homes. Many of them settled down in Jordan and Iraq, in Saudi Arabia. They were brought in as refugees. And because they were refugees, United Nations got involved and they were settled in different countries in Europe and North America. And this is in 90s that you see this happening. It's amazing. If you go around America at the moment, even in Canada, you will see before 90s there were no, any considerable Iraqi Shia community, other than Dearborn was an exception, and that's more a Lebanese town. But otherwise, if you look at other parts of US or Canada, you will see there were not any considerable, gathering of Shias from Iraq. But they were brought in as refugees by United Nations, settled in different parts of the country. And this is where I would like to talk about the role of Azaf Sayyid al-Shuhada. I happened to have gone for a program in Muharram in California. And I knew somebody, a Shia from Indian background. They lived in Seattle in the past. When I was in Vancouver, the other side of the border, in 80s. And they had been in touch with me even when I moved to Toronto. And very much, he would be insisting that when you go to California, now I settled down in Salt Lake City, why don't you come and visit us? And I said, it's difficult. We have programs every night. And this was in LA that I was residing for 10 nights. Because of his insistence, I said, okay, maybe on a Saturday night, or a Friday night, don't remember exactly which night was that. After the Majlis, I will fly. It's a 1-hour flight from Los Angeles to Salt Lake City, coming east. I'll spend the night and half a day, and then I have to get back to the program and the commitment that I have. And what he did was, he knew only 2 other Shia families in Salt Lake City. at that time. We are talking about 15 years ago. And on that day, when he got the commitment from me, he hired a hall in the university and put a small advertisement in the local paper that a gathering in memory of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. He knew only 2 other Shia family in town. There was no Husainiya, no Imam Baragah, no Masjid of the Shias, nothing. On the day and the time that we went to the university, we saw about more than 100 individuals who have gathered there without knowing one another. It was the name of Imam Hussein alayhi salam which brought them together. They didn't know the organizer, they didn't know me, we didn't know them. It was Imam Hussein alayhi salam. That pull that his name has, the love for Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and that first gathering became the basis of the networking among them. And within a year's time, they were able to get a very humble place for themselves on a rental basis, which they dedicated as a Husainiya for their gatherings. And this is where we see that wherever you are, even if you don't have any facilities, when Muharram comes, if you are a Shia, you will find a way to do the azah of Sayyid al-Shuhada. Salawat barak. And so cherish this institution that we have, the blessings which comes with it. It is, unparalleled in history of the Muslims. If you look at the history of the Shia growth around the world. This is just an example I'm giving you of our own time in the land that you consider to be your home. And it is these kinds of gatherings which gives us the opportunity to reflect on the issues of our madhab, on our life, and how to connect ourselves to our mazhab and the values for which Imam Hussein alayhi salam and his family sacrificed everything. The theme that I have been talking about in these majalis is basically to do with the family life from the perspective of the Qur'an and the Ahle-Bait. Because for us, Qur'an is the constitution and Ahle-Bait are the embodiment of the teachings of Qur'an. We will get the instructions there, but if we look for Uswa Hasana, role model, that is where we go to the Ahlul-Bayt. And that link is very well established in Islam. And the famous hadith that we have from Rasulullah where it says, إِنِّي تَارِكٌ فِيكُمُ الثَّقَلَيْنِ كِتَابُ اللَّهِ وَعِتْرَتِي أَهْلُ بَيْتِي. Salawat pranak para. There are 3 bases in the Qur'an that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions as the foundation of peace and tranquility, sukoon, in life of a human being. There is an element of zaman, referring to the night. There is the element of makan, and then there is the element of makin, the time, the space, and spouse. And we talked about the issue of makan, and now we are into this whole discussion about, the members of the family. Especially in the last 3 nights, Sunday, Monday, and last night, we talked about the roles of the spouses. And the emphasis was on this ayat from Surah Al-Rum, Surah number 30, ayat 21, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that I have created this institution of marriage لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا, so that you may gain peace and tranquility through it. And He gave us the initial ingredients for that peace and tranquility. وَجَعَلَ بَيْنَكُمْ مَوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً. The elements of mawadda and rahmah, love and compassion for one another has been created in every marriage by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But in order to keep that alive, in order to strengthen it, it is the husband and the wife who have to work on it. And the whole point of mawadda and rahmah is to be flexible in demanding our rights from one another. And that flexibility is very important. I gave you many, many examples. Even when the Sharia says certain things are wajib, certain things are not. Even when we see Rasulullah talking about the division of duties within the house and outside the house, saying that, the wife has to do whatever is inside and the husband has to do whatever outside. Again, those issues are not cast in stone. There is a lot of flexibility. Every situation has its own, case. And that is where we have to look at that. And that is the emphasis and the message that I have. That we have to, interact with one another on the basis of akhlaq and on the basis of mawaddat and rahmat. Salawat. Just to emphasize on a point I mentioned last night about zaban. If you remember the words of the hadith, where the Masoom says, Jirmuhu saghir wa jurmuhu kabir. It's a very small organ, but its sin and crime is great. Remember that. Keep that in mind, and then you will see that think about whatever you want to say before you say it. And that's where you will see things will bring about this sukoon and peace and tranquility that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has guaranteed in every marriage. Salawat. Salawat. Qur'an for us is a book which deals with our life. It talks about the matters of aqidah. It talks about the matters of our ahkam and rules and values. It talks about the history. Everything is in there. And that is why you will see, if somebody asks, what is Qur'an? Is it book of fiqh? No. It is not only book of fiqh, it is something else also. Is it a book of history? No, it's not a book of history. It has everything in it. This is, in short, kalam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in Surah Tahrim, we see examples of the couples who had challenging situations. We looked at the example of Hazrat Lut, Hazrat Nuh, and our own Prophet on one hand, as good husbands and not so good wives. But how they dealt with the situation on the basis of mawaddah and rahmah. Patience and sabr is very essential in that kind of situation. And then last night we looked at the opposite example of a wife who was a believer and a good wife, but the husband was evil in form of Bibi Asiya on one hand and the husband by the name of Fir'aun. And there we saw that at the end, Asiya had to make a choice between maintaining her faith and Iman or giving into kufr as far as the demand of the husband was concerned. She chose shahadat, and because of her sabr, she attained this status where our Prophet says that among all the women of the world, there are 4 who are the best. And in that list of 4 women, besides Bibi Fatima and Bibi Khadija and Bibi Maryam, you have the name of Bibi Asiya bint Muzahim. Salawat padne ek baar. But tonight I would like to go to another example, which is of our own Islamic history. And this is more to do with what I would call not interfaith marriage, but intrafaith marriage. We are not talking about marriage of a Muslim with a non-Muslim. There's a problem. Those problems there, we know about it. We are talking about intrafaith marriages. Marriage of a Shia to somebody who does not necessarily follow the Shia path of Islam, but they are within the fold of Islam. And the Sharia allows that. Of course, there are conditions, but there is no prohibition about it. And living as a Muslim, as a Shia minority in a predominantly Muslim societies, this has happened. We cannot deny it. And that is what I want to talk about as one challenge, especially in this part of the world, that we have to realize in those kinds of situations, the main issue, whether it's the man or the woman, is the issue of maintaining your faith, your aqidah, and your mazhab. It is better not to get into that situation. Sometimes it's even the issue of, a person marrying a woman or a man, a spouse who is less religious than him or her, or marrying somebody who is from another mazhab, and the Sharia has allowed that marriage. This is where we have to realize that when we talk about intra-faith marriages, this is not an easy issue. It has an impact in your dunya as well as the akhirah. You have to know. You have to know there are problems, there are going to be challenges. You have to know, will you be able to maintain the madhab of Ahlul-Bait or not? Will you be able to inculcate the vilayat and law of Ali in your children or not? These are issues you think about it before marriage. Sometimes we get situations where people come for advice, and when I say, well, have you thought about your children? What will happen to them? They say, when the time comes, we'll think about it. And I said, well, you are being emotional. I'm looking at it as an outsider, third party here. And observing situations, I tell you, there are going to be issues and problems. You either discuss that right now and discuss about it, come to an agreement or understanding. And as a Shia, whether you are going to be the husband or the wife there, it is your duty to make sure your aqidah and the vilayat of Ahlul Bayt continues among your children. Even if your spouse is from another madhab. So either you don't get into it, but if you go into it, you have to realize you are putting yourself into a bigger test and trial. This becomes a bigger imtihan and ibtila, and you'll have to see what to do. Because in many situations like that, children grow up more confused. They don't know they are Shia or they are Sunni. In Toronto, they come up with a term. It's not a technical term. They say sushi. They don't know. They don't know whether they're Shia or Sunni. They say, well, we are just Muslims. Sometimes these young people who are getting into that situation, they say, well, Moulana, it doesn't matter really, as long as they are Muslims. But there is nothing out there in this dunya known as just Muslim. You are something. You are either a Shia or a Sunni. If you are a Sunni, you are Sufi, or not Sufi, Hanbali, Maliki. You can't just be something Muslim. There is nothing there. Unless you are inventing a new mazhab. Saying, oh, Muslims only. But we cannot ignore the reality of history. And so my point is, now I'm not saying this is haram. But if you get into it, realize the challenge that you are putting yourself up to. And be ready for it. And that is why I brought up this example, that tonight I would like to share that yes, there have been situations among some of very prominent figures in our history where they went into this kind of marriage relationship, but they were able to maintain their faith and the faith and mazhab and vilayat of Ali Muhammad among their children. Salawat. Ikbar salawat. Bibi Asiya bint Muzahim's example is of ancient history for us, dealing with Firaun. And for her, the message of Musa was not something very foreign and alien to her. She raised him. Musa was like a son for baby Asiya. So already their relationship was there. And it was not difficult for her to know that the claim that he is making is true. And therefore she accepts it, even at the expense of being crucified by Pharaoh. But then the darajat that she gets, in the words of Rasulullah, and in Jannah, we know about it. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala quoted her dua in the Qur'an in Surah Tahrim, as we saw yesterday. But tonight I would like to go to another lady by the name of Asma bint Umays. She has played a very important role in the history of Islam and the history of Shiaism. She comes from Khathamiya tribe. She was first married to Ja'far bin Abi Talib, the older brother of Amir al-Mu'minin Ali bin Abi Talib alayhi salatu wasalam. When Islam started and the people of Mecca started opposing Rasulullah, and when they reached to the point that propaganda didn't work, they escalated the opposition to the level of violence. They started torturing, physically torturing those members of the small Muslim community who didn't have social support. They didn't belong to bigger tribes or families. It was easy, to pick them up. And when this happened, Rasulullah actually advised all of them that why don't you just, leave Mecca. Do hijrat, go to Habasha, Abyssinia. And it's interesting, he gives a reason. He says, go there because it's not a Muslim country. Muslims were a very small, community in Mecca there right at the beginning. He says, go to Abyssinia because the king of Abyssinia is an adil and just ruler. Our destination in Hijrat should be a land where there is justice and adil. Even if there is kufr, it doesn't matter. But if justice is there, that would be the preference from the Islamic perspective. If you can't get justice in your own land, that would be the option. But make sure, especially from the Shia perspective, there is a saying where we have, al-mulku yabqa ma'al kufr wa la yabqa ma'al dhulm. A kingdom can survive with kufr, but it cannot survive with zulm. And so justice is the criteria. And this is where a group of Muslims, about 60 to 70, got together as a group under the leadership of Ja'far bin Abi Talib. And they migrated to Abyssinia. Ja'far went with his wife Asma bint Umays, and there he basically assumed the leadership role, especially when Quraysh sent a delegation of 2 individuals with gifts for the ministers of the king, bribery basically, and try to convince the king that these are actually outlaws of our society, hand them over to us so we can take them back to Mecca and punish them according to our laws. But since the king was a just person, he basically, did not act just on the basis of the complaint. He asked the Muslims to come and defend themselves. And that is where Ja'far bin Abi Talib comes in. And this is where you see the reflection of the tarbiyat of Abu Talib himself. The gathering there in the court of the king, they are muhajirin. They are not even a muhajirin. I think the proper term of the modern days would be they were refugees. They were refugees in that land. But when Ja'far bin Abi Talib went with his delegation to the king, when the king came in, everybody, this was the custom and tradition, they went to almost the position of ruku or sajda. Ja'far bin Abi Talib and his friends, the Muslims, didn't do ruku or sajda. And the delegation of Quraysh seized that moment and they said to the ministers and the king, see, they are so rude, uncivilized, all these labels that they were using for Muslims anyway. And so when he asked him, the king asked him, why didn't you bow down? He says, well, our prophet says we bow down only to one Allah. We do not bow down to a human being. And so he said, tell me more about him. What are his teachings? And so he talks about it. And the Quraysh tried to incite the king because they were Christians. He said, ask them what is the opinion about Isa ibn Maryam. They don't believe he is son of God. And Ja'far bin Abi Talib had memorized the ayat from Surah Maryam about Isa ibn Maryam. And when he read those ayat, the king became so much impressed that he said, the difference between the teachings of your prophet and ours is just this one line on the sand. And he says, you are free to go and settle down wherever you want for however long time that you want in my land. And this is where we see the example of Abu Talib and Ali Abu Talib, that they were very much proud of Islam and their mazhab, even though they were in that very difficult circumstances as refugees, but they did not compromise on their values and their mazhab and deen and the teaching. Salawat. Interestingly, Abdullah bin Ja'far, the oldest son of Ja'far and Asma bint Umays, was born in Abyssinia. Probably historically, those who are teaching in Sunday schools, maybe they can use this part of the quiz. The first Muslim born outside Mecca would be Abdullah bin Ja'far, who later on was married to Bibi Zainab. And so this is the first hijrat of Asma bint Umays with her husband after Rasulullah migrated to Medina and he settled down. Many of these Muslims moved back to Arabia. And Ja'far with his wife and Abdullah, his son, and other children, they had 3 sons actually together. They came back to Medina. And it was in the 8th year of the Hijrah that Rasulullah appointed Ja'far bin Abi Talib as the commander-in-chief of the Muslim forces for the battle of Mu'tah. Unfortunately, Ja'far bin Abi Talib was killed in that battle. He became a shaheed, and the shahada took place in a way that his arms were cut. And Rasulullah then later on says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala replaced his hands with 2 wings, so he can fly around in the Jannat of Barzakh with the Malaika. And that is where you see the famous title of Ja'far, Ja'far al-Tayyar, is given to him after his Shahada. Salawat. After the Shahadat of Hazrat Ja'far, Abu Bakr proposes to Asma bint Umays. Remember, this was also an issue of provision and financial stability for a family. She is a widow now with 3 children. And so she accepted this proposal from Abu Bakr and she marries him. Later on, this marriage, was there for about 5 years. When Abu Bakr died, during that marriage, she has a son from Abu Bakr by the name of Muhammad bin Abi Bakr. And when Abu Bakr died, then she marries Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali bin Abi Talib alayhi salatu wasalam. And she had a son with Ali by the name of Yahya. So she had 5 sons, 3 from Ja'far, 1 from Abu Bakr, 1 from Amir al-Mu'mineen. But the reason why I'm mentioning this life of her, or her story, is that from year 9 of Hijrah till 13th, She was married to Abu Bakr. And in the last 2.5 years, Abu Bakr is the Khalifa of the Muslims. And there is a tension and opposition between Abu Bakr on one hand, assuming the Khilafat, and Ali and Fatima and the Ahle-Bait on the other hand. Just think about the challenge that Asma bint Umays is facing. This is where I was talking about the intra-faith marriage. It's not an easy situation for a man or a woman in this situation. But the question comes up, especially the 2.5 years when Abu Bakr is the Khalifa. Asma bint Umays is the wife of the Khalifa. The whole, issue of Khilafat after wafat of Rasulullah, the issue of Fadak. The question is there, where was the loyalty of Asma bint Umays? And that is the example that we have to keep in mind. That you could be married to somebody who is of a different mazhab, but you are not going to compromise when it comes to your aqeedah and the loyalty to the wilayat of Ahlul-Bait alayhi salatu wassalam. Salawat. So keep the example of Asma bint Umays, especially 2.5 years of her, time with Abu Bakr, when he is the Khalifa. What is amazing is that look at the tension between Abu Bakr on one hand and Sayyidat Nisa al-Alameen, Fatima al-Zahra on the other hand. But even at that time, I wouldn't be wrong in my reading of history that if Bibi Fatima had the closest friend for her, it was Asma bint Umays. She was like a confidant to Fatima al-Zahra. She could talk with her things she would not mention to others, while she is the wife of the first Khalifa. Not only that, in case of Fadak, according to our narrations, she is one of those who testified in support of Fatima by rejecting the hadith presented by the first Khalifa, who happens to be her husband. Well, they didn't accept her testimony, that's another issue. But look at her test and trial. Look at her challenge that she is going through. She is the one, according to, again, the narration that we have in our sources. She was the one who informed Amir al-Mu'mineen of the conspiracy of killing him in Namaz-e-Jamaat the next day. This is one of the events which took place later on. And she was so close to Bibi Fatima that when Bibi became very ill, close to her wafat, she talked to Asma bint Umays. She says, I don't like the way the janazah of women are taken out in Medina. Those days, after the ghusl and the kafan has been done, the body would be put on a carrier like a stretcher, and then they will raise the body. And Bibi Fatima, this is the example of what we call modesty and haya. She says, although the body is in the kafan, but people can still figure out the height of the body. And I don't like this. This is where Asma bint Umays says that I have seen a tradition in Abyssinia among the Habashi people, that they have a coffin which has a dome on it. They put that as a cover on the body. And she made a simple prototype and showed it to Bibi Fatima. And Bibi Fatima says, I like this and I would like you to make one for me. This is the first janazah which is taken in Medina with a kind of a ta'boot on the body. And so I'm just giving examples of how close, Asma bint Umays was to our Bibi. Not only that, if you look at the life of Bibi Fatima Zahra, the last person with whom she talked before her wafat is not any member of the family. It is Asma bint Umays, where she says, close the door and sit outside. As long as you hear my voice of, tasbih, you should know I'm alive. But once it stops, you should know I'm no more in this dunya. She was sitting there outside the door. And one of the wasiyat that Bibi had done to Asma bint Umays was that there are certain ladies, I don't want them to come and see my face after my death. And Asma, being loyal to the wilayat of Ali Muhammad, implemented that wasiyat, stopped certain prominent ladies from coming in. Until the complaint goes to the first Khalifa, the husband, he comes and he says, why you are stopping them? And Asma says, that was the wasiyat of Fatima. And that is where the Khalifa says, if that is the wasiyat, then it's the wasiyat. We can't do anything about it. And so the point I have here is that, you look at the life of Bibi Asma bint Umays, especially 2.5 years, during the time when the husband is the first Khalifa, she was still able to maintain her Iman and her loyalty and her wilayat in spite of being the wife of the first Khalifa. I don't think we can get any more challenging situation than the example of Asma bint Umays. Salawat parne ke baad. She is the lady who was there helping Amir al-Mu'mineen in giving ghusl to Bibi Fatima. She was the one who was providing the water there. And so when we look at this, this is the example that we have to keep in mind. That yes, marriage relationship is very important. The issue of talaq is always there. But sometimes those kinds of marriages become a means of imtihan and ibtila, test and trial. As long as you have this confidence that you will be able to maintain your wilayat and your aqidah on this mazhab which has been preserved by Imam Hussein alayhi salam, then you are okay. But if you do not find that confidence in yourself, don't get into those kinds of situations. Salawat parne ek baar. This is especially for the young people who are not yet married. When people think about it, yes, Sharia has allowed many things. But not everything which is allowed you have to do. There are challenges you bring upon yourself by implementing certain things which are allowed. And one of these is this, intrafaith marriages. Now, when we talk about Asma bint Umays, I think the amazing thing is the way she raised her son from Abu Bakr by the name of Muhammad bin Abi Bakr. If you write the history of Shiaism, after the generation of the Sahaba, who are known as the Shia, people like Salman and Abu Zar and Miqdad and Ammar, the first in the list of the Shias from the generation of Tabi'een after the Sahaba would be the name of Muhammad bin Abi Bakr, who is from the physically, biologically son of Abu Bakr, but a very strong supporter of the cause of Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali bin Abi Talib alayhi salatu wassalam. And this was all because of the tarbiyat and upbringing of Asma bint Umays. The way our sixth Imam says, كان النجابة لمحمد بن أبي بكر من قبل أمه أسمى بنت أميس رحمة الله عليه ولا من قبل أبيه. The nobility that you see in Muhammad bin Abi Bakr comes from his mother's side, not from the father's side. our contemporary poet from India, Payam Azmi, has very beautiful verse on that, where he says, Baap ke khoon ke taasir badal deti hai. The impact of the tarbiyat and upbringing of a mother can be such that even the impact of the biological traits of the father can be changed. Where you have a biological son of Abu Bakr, among the strongest of followers of Ali bin Abi Talib alayhi salatu wasalam. Salawat pढ़ने पर. I would dare to say this, and if I'm wrong, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive me, that in a situation where Prophet Nuh did not succeed in keeping his own son in the right path, Asma bint Umays succeeded in keeping her son on the path of the vilayat of Ali bin Abi Talib alayhi salatu wasalam. Salawat पढ़ने पर. He became so prominent and close to Ali that we have the riwayat that on the day of Qiyamah, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will announce, Aina Hawari Muhammad? Where are the close disciples of Muhammad? Certain Sahaba will come forward, Salman, Abu Zar and others. And then the announcement would be made, Aina Hawari Ali bin Abi Talib, Wasiyya Muhammad bin Abdullah Rasulullah. Where are the Hawariyun of Ali bin Abi Talib? And in that list you see the name of Muhammad bin Abi Bakr, who will move forward in the Maidan-e-Mahshar. That is the status that he attained. And this is basically because of the loyalty to Ali. He was not only raised by Asma bint Umays. He was about 4 or 5 years old when he came into the household of Amir al-Mu'mineen, where he becomes a stepfather. And we see in the life of Amir al-Mu'mineen, when it comes to the issue of the protest of Muslims against the third Khalifa and his unjust policies on economic issues, distribution of Baytul Mal, among those who are protesting against those unjust policies, you see the name of Muhammad bin Abi Bakr, very actively involved in that. To the extent that the camp of Muawiyah accused Muhammad bin Abi Bakr to be among those who murdered the third Khalifa. Then we see in the Battle of Jamal, Amir al-Mu'mineen assigned him as one of the officers of his army. And even when the battle concluded, when it came to the issue of, taking Aisha back to Medina, this assignment was given to the stepbrother, Muhammad ibn Abu Bakr, that you go and take care of your sister and take her back to Medina. And later on, Amir al-Mu'mineen appoints Muhammad bin Abi Bakr to the position of the governor of Egypt. Unfortunately, Amr ibn As and his troops, instigated by Muawiyah, were able to capture Muhammad bin Abi Bakr. He was killed. He became a shaheed because of his loyalty to Ali bin Abi Talib. And not only that, they actually put his body in the hide of a donkey and burnt it. That was the level of, bughz that they had towards Ali and the Shia of Ali. What we see in the attitude of the Taliban, whether it's in Afghanistan or Pakistan, this is nothing new. This is a continuation of the Umayyad policies against the Shias of Ali. Now, just to make a point here that there was an announcement made about this issue of, raising this awareness about what is happening to the Shias in Pakistan. It is something we have to think about when we sit down and talk about Karbala, when we sit down and look at the history of Shiaism. These are the situations where we have to do whatever we can by words or action or money or our pen or our speech in order to highlight the Mazlumiyat of the Shia of Ali bin Abi Talib all over the world, especially the situation which is becoming very, very critical as far as the Shias of Pakistan are concerned. And so it is something I would even urge you to think about it and to be part of that protest whenever it's done here. Salawat on the Iqbal. When the Shahadat of Muhammad bin Abi Bakr happened in the year 38 of the Hijrah, and Ali got the news, the way he talked about Muhammad bin Abi Bakr, you know, Ali was very much moved. He uses the words, he says, وَلَدًا نَاصِحًا. He was a sincere son to me. عَامِلًا قَادِحًا. A very hard-working person. سَيْفًا قَاطِعًا. A very penetrating sword. Very, shuja in whatever he was asked to do. وَرُكْنًا دَافِعًا. A supporting pillar for me. Somebody actually criticized Ali. He says, why are you grieving so much on Muhammad bin Abi Bakr? He was not your son. And Amir al-Mu'minin responds to him by saying, مَا يَمْنَعَنِي. What stops me from grieving on Muhammad bin Abi Bakr? إِنَّهُ كَانَ لِي رَبِيبًا. He was in a way adopted by me, raised by me. كَانَ لِبَنِي أَخًا. He was a brother to my sons. وَكُنْتُ لَهُ وَالِدًا. I was a father to him. وَعِدُّهُ وَلَدًا. And I considered him to be my son. That was the closeness between Amir al-Mu'mineen and Muhammad bin Abi Bakr. Salawat parne ek baar. Even when the time of marriage came, during the days of Osman, when some of the prisoners were brought from Iran, there were two ladies, daughters of the last Sassanid Persian emperor. And when the issue came up what to do with them, this is where Amir al-Mu'minin said they are, from the royal family. They should be given that dignity and honor and respect. And this is where we see that both of those daughters were married. One, Shahrbanu, was married to Imam Hussein alayhi salam in the same sitting. And the other one, Gayahan Banu, was married to Muhammad bin Abi Bakr. And their children, who became cousins, they were very close to one another. And this is why I'm talking about the issue of, inculcating the values of our Islam, the love of the Prophet, the wilayat of Ali, the love of Ahle-Bait is not only for us. We have a duty to make sure our relationship is such. And if it is not such, then at least we live up to that challenge of living that legacy to our children. Asma bint Umays succeeded in that. To the extent that Muhammad bin Abi Bakr, from Gayahan Banu, who is a son by the name of Qasim, and Qasim then had a daughter by the name of Farwa. So this is the granddaughter of Muhammad bin Abu Bakr, who is now married to our fifth Imam. And that is where you have our sixth Imam. He is actually, in a way, Muhammad bin Abi Bakr is the great grandfather of Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam. The whole point I have is that let us make sure, whatever situation we find ourselves, as a spouse in that relationship, we maintain our own Iman and our own Aqidah, and we have to try what is humanly possible to inculcate that deen and mazhab to the next generation, in a way that it continues generation after generation after generation. Salawat parne. ایک بار اور صلوات پڑھ دیں. Since we are going to talk about the Shahadat of Hazrat Ali Akbar tonight, let me also give you the example of Bibi Layla, the mother of Ali Akbar. ان کے بارے میں یقیناً جناب اسما بنت امیس کے سلسلے میں آپ نے بہت سی باتیں سنی ہوگی، لیکن ہمارا مقصد یہ تھا کہ ان کی سیرت اور ان کی لائف کو بریفلی آپ کے سامنے اس کا خاکہ پیش کریں تاکہ ہمیں سیرت کے حوالے سے کچھ سبق مل سکے کہ ایک ماں کی حیثیت سے کیا کیا خاتون کر سکتی ہے. جس طرح سے جناب آسیہ کی مثال تھی، ان کے چیلنج کچھ اور تھا. اسما بنت امیس کا چیلنج کچھ اور تھا. جناب لیلا کے سلسلے میں امام حسین علیہ السلام کی زوجہ ہیں، اور ان کے نسب کو اگر آپ دیکھیں، لیلا بنت ابی مرہ بن عروہ بن مسعود الثقفی. یہ عرب قبیلے کے مشہور اور بہت شریف قبیلے کی ہیں فرد. ان کے جو گرانڈ فادر تھے عروہ بن مسعود الثقفی، یہ اسلام سے پہلے جو دور تھا اس میں بہت ہی مشہور تھے. یہ لوگ طائف کے رہنے والے ہیں، مکہ کے نہیں ہیں. اور ان کی پرومیننس کا اندازہ اس بات سے ہوتا ہے کہ جب رسول اسلام نے اپنے پیغام کو پیش کیا ہے تو سورہ زخرف میں آیت نمبر 31 میں ایک عجیب غریب اعتراض ہے قریش کا. اس لیے کہ قریشی کہتے تھے کہ بھئی محمد عربی یہ کیا ہیں، یہ تو یتیم تھے بچپنے میں، ان کے پاس کچھ نہیں تھا جب تک جناب خدیجہ کے سے شادی نہ ہوئی. تو وہ اس لحاظ سے دنیاوی اعتبار سے معاملات کو دیکھ رہے تھے. خداوند عالم جو ہے منصب نبوت اور امامت کو مٹیریلسٹک پوائنٹ آف ویو سے نہیں دیتا ہے، جہاں وہ چاہتا ہے وہ دیتا ہے اس منصب کو. تو ان لوگوں کا اعتراض یہ تھا کہ قالوا لولا نزل هذا القرآن على رجل من القريتين عظیم، کہ اگر خداوند عالم کو کسی پر قرآن بھیجنا ہی تھا تو یہ محمد پہ کیوں بھیجا؟ یہ جو دو بڑے بڑے جو شہر ہیں مکہ اور طائف، ان میں جو بزرگ پرومیننٹ فیگرز ہیں ان پر بھیجتے. اور اس آیت کی تفسیر میں ہے کہ مکہ میں ولید بن مغیرہ کی بات ہوتی تھی اور طائف میں وہ کہتے تھے عروہ بن مسعود ثقفی. ان پر اگر قرآن نازل ہوتا تو ان کے پرومیننس کو دیکھتے ہوئے ہم مان لیتے. تو خیر وہ قریشی اعتبار سے بات ہو رہی ہے، لیکن اٹ شوز کہ جہاں تک اس خانوادے کی بات ہے، اس قبیلے کی بات ہے، یہ بہت ہی پرومیننٹ قبیلہ اور خانوادہ تھا عرب دور میں اسلام سے پہلے. اور جب اسلام آیا ہے تو ان کے جو دادا تھے سن 9 ہجرت میں آئے ہیں رسول کی خدمت میں. اسلام کو انہوں نے قبول کیا ہے اور اس کے بعد رسول سے اجازت چاہیے کہ چونکہ میرا اثر ہے قبیلے پر، ہم چاہیں گے کہ ہم طائف واپس جائیں اور اسلام کی دعوت انہیں دیں. وہ جاتے تو ضرور ہیں، دعوت بھی دیتے ہیں اسلام کی، لیکن وہاں مخالفت کا سامنا کرنا پڑا، یہاں تک کہ طائف کے لوگوں نے ان پر حملہ کیا ہے اور تیروں کی بارش ہوئی اور ان کو شہید کر دیا گیا ہے. شہادت سے پہلے لوگوں نے پوچھا کہ اب آپ اپنے بارے میں کیا سوچتے ہیں؟ تو انہوں نے کہا کہ ہمیں کوئی افسوس نہیں ہے اس بات پر، اس لیے کہ ہم بھی انہی لوگوں کے ساتھ محشور کیے جائیں گے جو شہدائے اسلام میں سے ہیں. تو یہ ایک خاندانی اثر آپ دیکھیں. جناب لیلا کے یہ دادا ہوتے ہیں اور اس لحاظ سے یہ جو وراثت میں جو صفات آتی ہیں یہ بہت اہم ہیں. اور اس لیے اسپاؤس کے سلیکشن میں بھی یہ ایک اہم پوائنٹ ہے جو خود ہمارے معصومین نے بھی کہا ہے کہ آپ بیک گراؤنڈ کو بھی دیکھیں تاکہ شادی صرف آپ کی نہیں ہے، آپ کو یہ بھی دیکھنا ہے کہ بعد میں یہ سلسلہ کس طرح سے آگے بڑھنے والا ہے. اس دین و مذہب کو آپ آگے پھیلا رہے ہیں، اولاد کے ذریعہ نہیں پھیلا رہے ہیں. لیکن اس میں جناب لیلا کے سلسلے میں ایک اور پوائنٹ ہے کہ ان کے والد کے سلسلے سے ان کا نسب جاتا ہے ابو مرہ اور پھر عروہ بن مسعود ثقفی. ماں کی طرف سے ان کی والدہ کا نام ہے میمونہ بنت ابو سفیان. ان کی جو والدہ تھی وہ معاویہ کی بہن تھی. لیکن خود ہمارے مورخین کہتے ہیں، یعنی اگر آپ رشتے کو دیکھنا چاہیں تو لیلہ بنت میمونہ بنت ابی سفیان، یزید بن معاویہ بن ابی سفیان. رشتے کے اعتبار سے جناب لیلہ یزید کی فرسٹ کزن ہوتی ہیں. ماموزاد پھوپھیزاد بھائی بہن ہیں ایک دوسرے کے. لیکن ہمارے مورخین کلیئرلی کہتے ہیں کہ جناب لیلہ کے پاس جو کردار تھا، جو صفات تھی، جو کمالات تھے، جو کوالٹیز تھے، وہ دادی حالی خاندان کی طرف سے آیا ہے، ماں کے رشتے سے نہیں آیا ہے. اور اس کا اجتماع آپ دیکھتے ہیں جناب علی اکبر میں. یعنی وہ ماں کی طرف سے بھی ان کے دادی حالی خاندان کے لحاظ سے ایک خاندانی فرد سے چلے ہیں وہ. اور اسی لیے آپ دیکھیں ایک مشہور واقعہ ابو الفرج اصفہانی نے لکھا ہے مقاتل الطالبین میں کہ ایک بار معاویہ اسی رشتے کے بنیاد پر گفتگو کر رہا تھا. اپنے حوالی موالیوں سے اس نے پوچھا کہ یہ بتاؤ من احق الناس لہذا الامر، کہ یہ خلافت کے معاملے میں سب سے زیادہ استحقاق کون رکھتا ہے، اہلیت سب سے زیادہ کس میں ہے؟ تو وہ بہرحال جواب تو ان کا وہی ہوگا کہ انتا، آپ ہی ہیں. ان کے علاوہ اس کے علاوہ تو اور کوئی جواب نہیں تھا. خود معاویہ معترف ہے، اور یہ وہ جملہ وہی ہے جو کہا جاتا ہے کہ الفضل ما شہد بہ العداء، فضیلت اسے کہتے ہیں جب دشمن بھی اس کا اقرار کرے. جناب علی اکبر کی عظمت کو اگر دیکھنا ہے تو معاویہ کے یہ جملہ دیکھیں. کہتا ہے لا، ہم اس کی اہلیت نہیں رکھتے ہیں، اولویت ہمارے ساتھ نہیں ہے. ان اول الناس بهذا الامر علی بن حسین بن علی. علی اکبر کا ذکر کرتا ہے کہ اگر دونوں خاندانوں میں اگر کوئی فرد ہے جس پر ایک اجماع ہو سکتا ہے اہلیت کے لحاظ سے خلافت کی، تو وہ علی اکبر بن حسین بن علی بن ابی طالب ہیں. صلوات پڑھنے ایک بار آپ. تو آپ جناب علی اکبر کی شخصیت کو جب آپ دیکھتے ہیں، باپ کی طرف سے معصوم کا سلسلہ ہے، ماں کی طرف سے جناب لیلہ ہیں، وہ بھی ایک عرب کے مشہور قبیلے اور خاندانی پس منظر سے آ رہی ہیں. اور آپ دیکھیں کہ جہاں تک وراثت کی بات ہے، اخلاق کی بات ہو رہی ہے، انسان کو وہی کرنا چاہیے کہ اس کے نیکیاں بعد والی نسل میں بھی باقی رہیں. امام حسین علیہ السلام کا قافلہ آگے بڑھ رہا ہے کربلا کی طرف. امام حسین علیہ السلام آگے آگے چل رہے تھے اپنے گھوڑے پر، جناب علی اکبر احتراماً ذرا پیچھے تھے. لیکن ایک مرتبہ اکبر نے سنا کہ بابا نے اچانک ایک جملہ کہا، ان للہ و انا الیہ راجعون الحمد للہ رب العالمین. علی اکبر گھوڑے کو آگے بڑھاتے ہیں، وہ پوچھتے ہیں کہ اے بابا، یہ کلمہ استرجاع اور حمد الہی برحق ہے، لیکن یہ موقع و محل کیا تھا؟ اس وقت امام نے کہا کہ ہم آگے چلتے ہوئے خفت سی آ گئی، نیم خواب کے عالم میں تھے کہ مجھے آواز سنائی کہ کوئی کہہ رہا ہے کہ یہ قافلہ موت کی طرف جا رہا ہے اور موت ان کی طرف آ رہی ہے. تو اس لیے ہمیں افاقہ ہوا اور ہم نے یہ جملہ زبان پر جاری کیا. آپ رد عمل دیکھیں جناب علی اکبر کا، صرف ایک سوال تھا، یا ابتا لسنا علی الحق، بابا کیا ہم حق پر نہیں ہیں؟ حسین نے کہا یقیناً ہم حق پہ ہیں۔ اس وقت علی اکبر نے وہی جملہ دہرایا ہے جو علی کئی بار دہرا چکے تھے مختلف مقامات میں، کہ بابا جب ہم حق پہ ہیں تو ہمیں اس کی پرواہ نہیں ہے۔ لَوَقَعَ الْمَوْتَ عَلَيْنَا أَمْ نَقَعَ عَلَى الْمَوْتِ، کہ چاہے موت ہماری طرف آئے یا ہم موت کی طرف جائیں، ہمیں مرنے سے کوئی خوف نہیں ہے اگر حق پر ہیں تو۔ امیر المومنین کی زندگی میں اگر آپ دیکھیں مختلف مواقع پر امیر المومنین نے یہ جملہ کہا ہے، اور وہی بات اسپونٹینیسلی پوتے کے زبان پر آ جاتی ہے۔ نسلاً بعد نسل یہ کردار، یہ اخلاق جو رسول کا اخلاق تھا، جو علی کا اخلاق تھا، وہ چلا آ رہا ہے۔ اور اسی بات کو ہمیں دیکھنا ہے کہ کوشش کی جائے ان کی سیرت پر عمل کرتے ہوئے، اپنے امکان کو نظر میں رکھتے ہوئے ہمیں اپنی ذمہ داری ادا کرنی ہے۔ اگر آپ عاشور کے دن کے واقعات کو دیکھیں، امام حسین علیہ السلام کے لیے بہت سے امتحانی مواقع آئے ہیں، جس میں سے خود اصحاب اور گھر والوں کے اذن جہاد کا معاملہ بھی تھا۔ جہاں جہاں تاریخ نے لکھا ہے کہ کوئی صحابی یا بنو ہاشم کا کوئی فرد آیا ہے اذن جہاد کے لیے، امام نے ہمیشہ ہیزیٹیٹ کیا ہے، جواب نہیں دیتے ہیں فوراً، چاہے عباس ہوں یا قاسم ہوں یا اون محمد ہوں یا جون جیسے غلام کیوں نہ ہوں جو سابق غلام تھے، ان کو بھی منع کیا۔ لیکن عجیب و غریب ہے کہ مقاتل کو جہاں جہاں ہم نے دیکھا ہے کہ جب جوان بیٹا سامنے آتا ہے استعذن فاذن له، بیٹے نے اجازت مانگی اور بابا نے فوراً اجازت دے دی، اس لیے کہ حسین جانتے تھے قاسم میرا بیٹا نہیں ہے اور محمد میرا بیٹا نہیں ہے، عباس میرے بھائی ہیں، لیکن خداوند عالم اب میرا ذاتی امتحان لے رہا ہے اولاد کے ذریعے۔ بیٹے نے اجازت مانگی، حسین نے ایک لمحے کے لیے بھی تأمل نہیں کیا، اذن لہ، اجازت دے دی، صرف اتنا کہا کہ بیٹا جا کے زینب سے بھی مل لو۔ حمید بن مسلم کی خود روایت ہے کہ ہم نے دیکھا اکبر جب گئے ہیں خیموں میں، بی بی نے گھیر لیا، بار بار خیمے کا پردہ اٹھتا تھا اور گرتا تھا، اس لیے کہ جب بھی اکبر نکلنا چاہتے تھے بیویاں گھیر لیتی تھی کہ بیٹا تم کہاں جا رہے ہو، ہمیں کس کے سہارے چھوڑ کے جا رہے ہو۔ آخر میں جب الوداع ہو کے آئے ہیں وہاں سے، امام نے اجازت دے دی تھی، لیکن امام کے دل کی جو کیفیت تھی وہ صرف خدا جانتا ہے اور حسین جانتے ہیں۔ جوان بیٹا روانہ ہوا، لیکن اس دل کی کیفیت کو سمجھنا ہو تو دیکھیں کہ حسین سے برداشت نہ ہوا، پیچھے پیچھے چلنے لگے۔ کچھ آگے جانے کے بعد اکبر کو احساس ہوا کہ بابا پیچھے پیچھے آ رہے ہیں، گھوڑے کو روکتے ہیں، پلٹ کے دیکھا تو ضعیف باپ آ رہا ہے، کہا بابا آپ نے اجازت دے دی ہے۔ اس وقت حسین نے وہ جملہ کہا تھا، بیٹا اگر تیری اولاد ہوتی، 18 سال تک اگر پالا ہوتا، حضرت حسین اگر بیٹا علی اکبر جیسا بیٹا ہو کہ دشمن بھی اس کے فضائل کا معترف، حسین کے لیے بہت بڑا امتحان تھا کس طرح سے جانے دیں۔ آخر میں بس ایک جملہ کہتے ہیں، خداوندہ تو گواہ رہنا، میرا وہ بیٹا جا رہا ہے کہ جو سیرت میں بھی صورت میں بھی اور کردار و گفتار میں بھی رسول کا شبیہ تھا۔ جب بھی ہماری تمنا ہوتی تھی رسول کی زیارت کرے، ہم علی اکبر کے چہرے کی طرف دیکھا کرتے تھے، خداوندہ وہ بیٹا ہم روانہ کر رہے ہیں۔ آخر میں عمر بن سعد کی طرف نظر کرنے کے بعد یہ وہ منفرد موقع نظر آتا ہے کہ جہاں امام نے بد دعا کی ہے اس پر کہ خداوندہ تیری نسل کو بھی برباد کرے جس طرح سے تو میری نسل کو ختم کرنے کی کوشش کر رہا ہے۔ عزاداران حسین اکبر جاتے ہیں اور جب جانے کے بعد اپنا تعارف کیا، رجس کے اشعار پڑھے۔ یزیدی لشکر میں سے ایک افسر نے کہا کہ یا علی ان لک رحم بیزید بن معاویہ، کہ اے علی تمہاری رشتہ داری ہوتی ہے یزید بن معاویہ سے، یہ ماں کے فرسٹ کزن ہوتے ہیں، لہٰذا اس رشتے کی بنیاد پر اگر تم چاہو تو ہم امان دینے کے لیے تیار ہیں۔ اس وقت بھی آپ اخلاق کے مظاہرے کو دیکھیں، فرماتے ہیں تمہیں شرم نہیں آتی ہے کہ یزید بن معاویہ کا رشتہ تمہارے لیے محترم ہے، لیکن رسول اللہ کا رشتہ جو میرے بابا کے ساتھ ہے اس کا کوئی خیال نہیں ہے۔ اور اس کے بعد جنگ شروع کرتے ہیں اور کئی یزیدیوں کو فنار کرنے کے بعد آخر میں جب مقابلہ جیتے ہیں واپس آتے ہیں بابا کے پاس۔ خداوند عالم نے حسین کا امتحان مختلف طریقے سے لیا۔ جوان بیٹا اس مقابلے میں جیت کے آتا ہے، لیکن انعام کے طور پہ کیا مانگا ہے؟ یا ابتا القتل العطش قد قتلنی وثقل الحدید اجہدنی، بابا پیاس نے مجھے قتل کر دیا ہے، اسلحے اور زرا کی سنگینی نے مجھے تھکا دیا ہے، آیا کوئی سبیل ہے کہ قطرہ کا ایک پانی مل سکے؟ وہ حسین جو ولی خدا تھے سرزمین پر، پوری کائنات پر تصرف ان کے ہاتھ میں تھا، چاہتے تو نہر القمہ کو اپنی طرف موڑ سکتے، لیکن حسین جانتے تھے خدا امتحان لے رہا ہے، اتنے مظلوم واقع ہوئے ہیں، اپنی زبان دے دیتے ہیں تاکہ بیٹے کو احساس ہو کہ باپ کی زبان تجھ سے بھی زیادہ خشک ہے۔ عزاداران حسین کہاں حسین اکبر کے پیچھے پیچھے چل رہے تھے، اب روانہ کرتے ہیں کہ بیٹا جاؤ جہاد کے لیے، تمہارے جد ہمارے نانا آ چکے ہیں، وہ پانی کا ایک کاسا لیے ہوئے ہیں، تجھے سیراب کر دیں گے اس طرح سے کہ کبھی بھی پیاس پھر نہیں لگے گی۔ عزاداران حسین اکبر جاتے ہیں، جنگ لڑتے ہیں، لیکن یہ ایک تنہا مجاہد کب تک لڑتا؟ جب چاروں طرف سے گھیر لیا گیا اور حملے کی شدت ہو جاتی ہے، ایک مرتبہ ایک نیزہ آیا اکبر کے سینے پر لگا، اکبر اپنے کو گھوڑے پر سنبھال نہ سکے۔ عزاداران حسین اکبر جب گھوڑے سے گرے ہیں، باپ کو آواز دی ہے، لیکن انداز کچھ اور تھا۔ ہر مجاہد گرتے وقت حسین کو نصرت کے لیے آواز دیتا رہا۔ کسی نے کہا یا امہ ادرکنی، یہاں تک کہ عباس نے بھی کہا تھا یا خاک ادرکا خاک، لیکن یہ اکبر جو خلق نبوی کے مظہر تھے، باپ کو مدد کے لیے نہیں پکارا بلکہ ایک طولانی جملہ کہا ہے، سینے میں نیزہ لگا ہوا ہے، کتنی تکلیف ہوئی ہوگی، لیکن اخلاق کو آپ دیکھیں، کہتے ہیں بابا آپ کے جد آ چکے ہیں, انہوں نے مجھے سیراب کر دیا, اب میں پیاسا نہیں. یہ اس لیے کہا تھا کہ حسین کے چہرے پر غم کے آثار نمایاں تھے. بیٹے نے پانی مانگا لیکن ایک قطرہ بھی نہ دے سکے. اکبر چاہ رہے تھے بابا کو مطمئن کر دے, بابا غم نہ کرنا, آپ کا بیٹا پیاسا نہیں. حسین نے جب یہ جملہ سنا ہے کھڑے ہو جاتے ہیں, مقتل کی طرف روانہ ہوئے. یا علی کہہ کے کہیں بیٹھ جاتے تھے, یا علی کہہ کے کہیں اٹھ جاتے تھے, پتہ نہیں علی اکبر کو آواز دیتے تھے یا مشکل کشا کو مدد کے لیے پکار رہے تھے. لیکن جب عزاداران حسین شیخ مفید کی روایت ملتی ہے کہ جب امام حسین علیہ السلام اکبر کے قریب پہنچے ہیں, دیکھتے ہیں کہ زینب پہلے سے آ چکی تھی. زینب کو احساس تھا یہ باپ کا معاملہ ہے, جوان کے لاش کے ماں کا معاملہ ہے, شاید حسین برداشت نہ کر سکے. لیکن حسین نے کہا زینب جب تک بھائی زندہ ہے خیمے سے نہ نکلنا, روانہ کر دیتے ہیں. عزاداران حسین ضمیر کربلا پر بیٹھتے ہیں اور کہتے ہیں بیٹا تمہارے بعد اس دنیا پر خاک ہو, تمہارے بعد اب ہم زندہ رہ کے کیا کریں گے. جب اکبر کے ہاتھ کو دیکھا کہ سینے پہ ہے, ہاتھ کو ہٹاتے ہیں, اور جب نیزے کی ننی کو دیکھا حسین اپنے ہاتھ سے اس ننی کو پکڑتے ہیں اور اس کے بعد وہی فقرہ پڑھا ہے جو مینا میں حاجی قربانی کے بعد کے وقت ادا کرتا ہے. بسم اللہ و باللہ, اے ابراہیم آ کے کربلا میں دیکھو, حسین آج اپنے بیٹی کی قربانی پیش کر رہے ہیں. انی کا نکلنا تھا کہ اکبر کی روح بھی ملیالہ کی طرف پرواز ہو گئی. امام نے اکبر کے لاشے کو اٹھایا, چند قدم چلنے کے بعد جب بنو ہاشم کے خیمے نظر آئے لاشے کو زمین پر رکھ دیتے ہیں, کہتے ہیں اے بنو ہاشم کے بچوں آ کے اپنے بھائی کے لاشے کو لے جاؤ, اس ضعیف باپ سے یہ لاشا نہ اٹھے.